few quick things. How many of you need to leave for a class?
No.
Okay. Well, it looks kind of split. So
we have two options.
We have two options. We can either cut the lecture at 1, or we can go to 1:30 and we're going to have a recording.
And she can go over more information if we can go till 1:30 if you guys don't mind, and then we're going to try to post that to the FBU Facebook site.
Is that all right with everyone? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Number 2, we have a sign-in sheet there in the back. If you want, please leave your name and the email that will best get to you. Because we've been having some trouble with the 5 branches email, so if you have a different email that you check more regularly, please leave that. It'll allow us to give you more heads up about what kind of things we want to do. I really want to see both of our campuses kind of united because we're really separate right now. I really enjoy seeing Santa Cruz students here, and I would love to be a little bit more involved with each other. Whether that's holding more events at both campuses or having, something more than just a barbecue or something. I really enjoy these kind of lectures. So yeah, if you want to leave your email, we'll give you some heads up. Also, it's great to have that because we can send out email and you can give us feedback on the lecture today, and you can give us feedback in regards to what you think will be good talking points for other future seminars or workshops.
And just real quickly, we've had a lot of feedback about the reason we're trying to do this list is because it's been hard to reach everybody. We don't have a real streamlined way of doing that. But we are going to try to use both the email, like Shay was saying, and try to really drive people to the FBU Facebook pages because we can send out e-bites and track how many people are responding that they're coming, and it'll give us a lot of information to be able to do these. So if anybody's not on Facebook, if you guys could just get on there for, FBU, it's really helpful. As a secondary thing, we're also going to try to send out whichever emails are on our email list.
With that being said, again, thank you all for coming, and let's get started.
Hit the lights down on this.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So I wanted to thank the Student Council and Laura for facilitating this talk today. Poor Laura just wanted to come up for a tour on farm. It was like, it's winter time. Everything is dormant. There's sticks and dirt. So I said, well,
yeah.
She goes, well, I want to hear you speak.
And Bill highly recommended you.
Bill, yeah. So this is how that evolved, and I said find funding, and so she did find funding for the Student Council. So thank you all very much. So I'm going to get moving because I do realize that we are on a tight schedule. So I'm Peggy Shafer of the Chinese Medicinal Herb Farm, and I've been farming Chinese herbs for almost 20 years. And before that, I was a regular farmer, working at greens farms, organic greens farms, growing organic shiitake, that kind of thing, greenhouse management. So that's my background. I don't have a background in Chinese medicine. But I was looking, as a farmer, I was looking for a niche market and something that I could feel good about what I did. And so I was eating organically, and I was using Chinese herbs, and I was starting to question the quality of the Chinese herbs that I was getting. This is a long time ago. And so my acupuncturist, he was very tricky. He had a garden himself, and I knew he had a garden, but I hadn't been to his garden. And he started giving me herbs, and what he was doing was he was buying the herbs, he was taking the label out of them, and he was just giving them to me, oh, here, this is just a slip from my garden, this is just a start from my garden, you throw it, you see. So then I started researching out growing Chinese herbs, and it took me 2 years to decide that it was going to be a viable venture. And so then I started a transplant business, for selling potted plants for other people, which I don't do anymore. And then I moved into the field and growing in the field, and I realized that you can't do everything, so I stuck to mostly just doing the field. And now all these years later, as I'm getting older, I'm going much more into education, and that's why I'm here and not tilling the field, which I could be doing today because it's unnaturally dry. It's so dry I can work the fields already. So that's kind of interesting and weird at the same time. So at this point, I've grown out about 260 different Chinese herbs. Of course, there's thousands of them, but about 260 of them, to see if I can germinate them, to see if they grow well with my management practices and with the soils that I have on my farm, which is outside of Petaluma, it's west of Petaluma, just to see if they'll grow well. And then somewhere along the way, I started joining up with, universities, acupuncturists, people that were doing grants, different, the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, all USDA, all different kinds of people have been kind of interested in what I've been doing, and so some of them started testing the herbs. So now it's kind of an interesting kind of thing to also not only see what grows well, but also what seems to make good medicine. So I'm trying to focus on that as well as just, well, can I get this thing to grow? Because I've found that not everything I can grow seems to make really good medicine. And we'll go into a little bit about that, about how we can assess good quality medicine, what makes good quality medicine, but not at the very moment. So historically, it was a village-based situation where people would just, local people would go into the hills or go out into the fields or whatever and collect medicine and serve the people of that little area. And then it was all about health, and it was all fresh herbs and dried herbs. And everything has changed. Now in this contemporary market, it's a gift to the world, really, Chinese medicine. And so now everybody all over the world wants to use Chinese herbs, and we're kind of loving it to death in it. And it's when anything starts to be kind of interesting and hot and everybody wants it, it kind of does a little thing with the money. And it starts making people want to try and make more money off it, and it gets driven into a way that is usually less about health and more about money. So people are now trying to do a lot of patenting because that's where the money is. And as it starts to go more into the drug model, it starts to go towards more money situation and further away from health. And then also to get the herbs long distances, they've had to dry them down much harder than they actually dry them down in China. And then also to try and protect them for long distances and long periods of time, they have sometimes materials sprayed on them that are not necessarily helpful for the end user. And that leads into a bunch of quality control issues, of some which we'll cover. One of the first issues I think we should cover is scarcity of Chinese herbs. We've basically exceeded the carrying capacity of China for the herbs that we can pull out of the wild. So in China, they're starting to do a lot more cultivation of Chinese herbs, and we are starting to do cultivation here. Different places in Europe are starting to do cultivation. I wouldn't be surprised if a number of African countries are now starting to do some cultivation of Chinese herbs. But basically it's made that so many herbs have been pulled out of China at this point that there's a lot of scarcity issues. In fact, a lot of herbs are being imported from nearby countries, imported into China, and re-exported out as Chinese herbs. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of those herbs, I'm sure, are efficacious and of good quality, but it does kind of ruin GMPs, or good manufacturing practices. And so that's becoming a big issue because as the whole world is trying to adhere to certain rules and regulations, it goes on from there. So as you know, there's thousands and thousands of Chinese herbs that are used in Chinese medicine. Roughly, I mean, maybe you guys even know, I'm sure some of you do know much more than I do about how many are used, but practitioners basically tell me that roughly 300 or so are used in this country. And of those 300 or so, well, actually that's not quite true, because this is actually based on Chinese numbers. That the top 25 most commonly used herbs, those are now being cultivated, and there's a big drive to actually cultivate more than that, which is a good thing, as long as it's done with intention towards the end user, not intention towards the pocketbook of the owner of the company or the investor or whatever. But anyway, so a lot more of the herbs are being cultivated. And a lot of them are being cultivated actually not necessarily in the southeast, which were, well, there's herbs, of course, that are native all over China, but a lot of them were in the southeast, and a lot of them are now being grown in the west of China. And so a lot of them are being taken out of their native extent or their traditional zone where they originally evolved. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean anything negative, but some of them
I need one light on.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Anyway, so some of them it doesn't follow the Dowdy principle. So in China, they're just trying to figure out what makes good efficacious herbs, as well as other regions in the world are also trying to figure out where to grow herbs that they make good quality herbs. So there are still 75% or so of the herbs that are still wild harvested, and those are the ones that are more difficult to grow. The ones that are either slow growing or we don't necessarily know how to grow, the ones that are slow to reproduce, that kind of thing. Basically what's happened with all of our taking of the herbs out, selecting them out of the forests or the fields, the ravines, wherever it may be, it's basically, the Red Plant Data Book has said that roughly 35% of Asian medicinal herbs are actually endangered at this point. And that's kind of sad. The situation in India is actually worse, but I'm not really going to touch much on India today. I don't think we have the time. So something like Sweet Annie or Qinghao, I mean, it's a weed. There's a lot of Chinese weeds. It's amazing to me how many weeds there are. I was just talking to this gal right here about Shanyao, and in this area down here where it's warmer than it is actually in my area, Shanyao would be a horrible weed here. It would be like down at the Learning Garden in Venice. It would be just kind of like a blanket of Shanyao. It would be crazy. But where I am, it's too cool and it doesn't really reproduce. So there are a lot of Chinese herbs that are weedy, and those, they're not at risk. It's not a problem. Most of those actually don't have a Dowdy principle or Dowdy outside principle attached to them. But there's a lot of herbs that are from fragile ecosystems, like Muxiang. That's a CITES listed plant. That's a Conference and Trade of Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora. So that means it's got trade regulations attached to it, and that's one reason why it's actually hard to get. But it's from a fragile ecosystem of wetlands, and China, as well as the United States, we've drained most of our wetlands. So the environment, the ecosystem disappeared away from that plant. So there aren't that many that are easily had for the harvesting. And slow growing plants. There's a lot of slow growing plants. I mean, these are wild plants. These are unselected, undomesticated plants. They are not bred to be like lettuce, where you sow them, and boom, they all come up pretty much in, at this time of year. Lettuce will come up in 4 or 5 days in the garden. Very nice, okay, and then you can transplant them around in several weeks, and then you go into harvest, and it's all kind of boom, boom, boom. Pretty easy. But Chinese herbs, they are not necessarily like that. They have their own schedules, and we have to just be cognizant of that. And it's not necessarily hard. We just have to, think like a wild creature, and it kind of comes along. But, so we can't expect a slow-growing creature, being a plant, to behave more like a lettuce or a domesticated plant. That's what I'm just trying to say. So there's lots of issues with the policies that are in effect to try and protect these plants. It's a huge area, and trying to police all of China is just really not going to happen. Not only just because the area is so large, but there's a lot of relationship situations that just kind of skirt that issue altogether. Data is incomplete. The nomenclature issue situation, boy, that's fluid. And I'm not just talking about medicinal opinion, or a botanical name, or even pharmaceutical name, or whatever, but, if you need to start to wander over towards India, you've got, boy, lots and lots of names for any particular herb. And if you go into something like Herbs of Commerce, which is a pretty standard industry book, you'll look up anything, usually under its botanical name, and you'll find, an entire list of names that different groups of people know it by. So if you go into one area and look for something, oh no, we don't have that here. We don't have that here. Well, it's the same as what these guys are looking for and calling it something different. So it's the nomenclature thing, the situation is pretty interesting. So let's move on from the protection. So the future access of Chinese herbs, this isn't something that I used to lecture about 10 years ago. It just kind of wasn't, an issue so much. I knew that we were over-harvesting herbs. I mean, lots of people knew that we were over-harvesting herbs. That was one of the big deals. But now there's a lot of importation and exportation bans. And it's instigated by China and the United States. So some of it is from the CITES treaty, which anybody that signs that treaty, anybody being a country, signs that treaty. It basically says that you will adhere to protecting these plants and you won't engage in trade. Well, it doesn't, the rule is there, but there's a lot of holes in that rule, and you can find pretty much anything being imported and being exported, even though it's the peoples have signed the treaty. But so it goes. So for importation bans, you all know about mahong. It's very hard to get mahong here, and so this is the part about the recording kind of thing. I'm trying to get people to grow it here.
We can turn it off for a second.
I wasn't. Yeah, edit that part out. It's like in the book, my editor. That was the one thing that she wouldn't allow me to put in there.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so if we can grow it here, we can have it here, and nobody heard me say that even on tape. Okay.
We'll edit it.
So we've got the importation ban and the exportation ban. Actually, China will export it, but we're not allowed to import it. But sometimes it gets through. But there are starting to be some restrictions from China of what they're going to let out. Like when was that? Within the past 6 months, Gansao, the glycerizer Euro lenses, has had a restriction put on it. You know, the great harmonizer. Really. And you know what Japan did when they found out that that restriction was placed?
Started growing it.
Well, that would be a good idea, and I'm sure I'm sure they are growing it. They started stockpiling it.
Ah.
So yeah, that was kind of interesting. So they got about 2 years supply so far, from what I hear. And it was in the media. It wasn't investigative journalism on my part. So anyway, so there's importation bans and exportation bans, and that all. Can you hold it till later? Okay, thanks. So I'll leave some time for questions. Maybe I can even leave time for questions before we get to one, so that folks that have questions that have to take off, we can answer those, with the exception if I'm going to cover that material after you leave. When you have to go to the library to look at the video. Okay, so supply chain failures. I don't know if there's more reporting and just more disclosure or what. I don't know if it's a situation that's more prevalent than it used to be or not, but there's a lot of supply chain failures, which is basically a situation of something happened somewhere along the way, and what was ordered and what is in front of somebody is not what it's supposed to be. Whether it's on purpose contamination, accidental contamination, nomenclature confusion, be it botanical or be it medicinal opinion name. You guys know that the medicinal opinion name is the name of the medicine, not the plant, correct? Good, good. And with GMPs, the good manufacturing practices, all your packages now legally have to say the genus and species on them. Whereas 5 years ago, if I went to a pharmacy, it would just say something like Gansao on it. And Gansao, it could be licorice, it could be glycerizer urolensis, it could be glycerizer glabra, but we need to, with the advent of worldwide GMPs, we need to stick to the botanical name because there's just so much confusion. And the word species is specific. The word specific comes from the word species, which just means that there should be just one plant that is known under a particular name. Now that's in the best of cases, and there's a number of plants that share other names, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Recent and projected cost increases. That's getting to be a problem for some folks. That was Subhuti Dharmanandra, and then also Andy Ellis from Springwind. They both said that, and I think they said that this was for last year and continuing on for a number of years, and I don't know how many years, that the cost increases per year should be, we can expect anyway, 25 to 30% increases. Per year. And that's for a whole slew of socioeconomic reasons that we just don't, I can see this clock right in front. We don't have time to go into it, but it's pretty interesting, and I think that we can expect that, and I think it's reasonable to expect that. They're all obvious reasons to me. And then scarcity. If we just don't have it, on the planet, people just can't use it, no matter what it is. And then it just might fade away. And this is a picture of ephedra. That's not going to fade. That's not going to fade away. We can grow that. It's pretty easy. So marketable medicine, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier. Some of the issues are that it's moving away from whole herb and it's moving into what people are calling herbal products or herb products. Part of that is that it's because they can patent it and they can make money, they can get investors, and it can get to be a big business thing. And it's a huge business thing. It's big money. It's big money. It's not, as I said, big money, not big health. We're all in it for the big health thing. Other people are in it for the big money thing, and they're supplying us. So if we can help control that and drive it back a little bit, or at least educate us ourselves, and try and treat our patients properly, or to the best of our ability by knowing and educating ourselves and knowing what's going on and trying to use the best quality that we can get. And usually whole herb is the most recognized, and it's the one that can be least sophisticated, which is one of the industry terms for cheating. If you have a powder in front of you, it's like, okay, what does it smell like? What does it look like? What does it taste like? And people that have a lot of experience certainly can know that. But if you have a root in front of you, you have a lot more resources to look at within that situation of that organic matter in front of you. Then there's some statistics there. I'm trying to move fast because we have so much material to cover. But I mean, this is huge. This is huge, and this is the most recent numbers that we have. These were just released in the past, say, 6 months or so. I also have a list of media reports, recent media reports. If anybody's interested in receiving that, I didn't print it out because the URLs are ridiculously long, and I'd be happy to to email it to you. And I've got a sign-up list over here, and you can just please print carefully. If you put your information over here and ask for the resource, I guess I was calling it a resource addendum or media reports, I can just email it to you, and you can read to your heart's delight on whatever interests you. But I kind of crawl around and look for those kinds of things. I find them to be very fascinating. But so it's big business, huge business, as you can see. So next one, yeah, here's the next one. So this is also a fairly recent report. This is 2012. This is the United States. We weren't actually in the top position outside of China previously, but we seem to have gone to the top when I wasn't looking. Of the biggest importer outside of Asia, and I say that instead of even just the biggest importer because I doubt that a little bit. It's good to have your BS meter going all the time. So it really is. It really is. But we for many years have been one of the top importers of Chinese herbs. And the reason why I'm stressing that or stating that is that gives us some leverage. You guys as future practitioners can use that leverage. Knowledge is power, gang together to drive the industry where you want to do it, where you want to go, what kind of medicine you want to have. I know it's not easy. It's true. It's not easy, but otherwise, roll over dead. So some big challenges. Climate change is a huge issue for medicines. Well, it's a huge medicine for everything, right? But for medicines in particular, for a plant, if you're thinking about a plant to handle climate change, it either has to go up a mountain, it has to move, or it has to adapt. And if it doesn't do one of those things, it is dead. And the pollinators have to find it too. So those creatures have to move too, but most of those at least have wings. So there's a lot of plants that are being adversely affected, and sometimes there isn't a top of a mountain anymore. Sometimes we top out, or whatever you want to call it. The herbs that are Himalayan in origin, high altitude herbs, those ones are being hit the hardest. Also predominantly, most of the plants from high elevation areas, the predominant amount of plants from high altitude areas are medicinal plants. And it's fascinating to me. And whether it's because they evolve with high UV temperature situations that were extreme, whatever that might be, I think it's pretty fascinating. But as those temperatures are changing, we have to be really careful to be respectful of those plants and not love them to death. But it also makes me think as a grower, so if we take some of those high altitude plants and grow them at lower altitudes, will they be effective? So I always have that kind of little dialogue going too. Unsustainable wild collecting practices, that's really happening a lot. It's slowed down a little bit, partly because there's a lot less logging. The logging practices have changed in China, which is really, really wonderful. There's no flooding of villages, or I shouldn't say no, but there's less flooding of villages because the hillsides are more stable, and the extreme hillsides are not being logged out. So those spaces are there for the plants to grow in, and making spaces for that. But there's still a lot of wild harvesting going on. The way that plants get harvested out, it's a very regional thing, and then it gets conglomerated bigger and bigger, and so it's really hard to find the origin of a lot of the Chinese herbs. Where actually did they come from? Most of them basically are just thrown into a big hopper from a wide, a vast area. So it's pretty hard that way, but it's amazing how far people are now having to go back and away from populated centers to try and find the different herbs. It's a big deal. It's actually a big deal. So habitat loss and extractive technologies, as the rising middle class is gaining a foothold in China, more people are eating meat, and to eat meat, they're generally having cattle take up a lot of room. They take up a lot of water. China does not have very much arable land. They don't have a lot of water. Per capita, they have less arable land per person than most of the world. So most of that needs to go for food, as is only logical. So using land for cattle is not the most efficient way to do it, but it's the pot calling the kettle black from America, So extractive technologies, mining is an issue, either state mining or renegade mining, or whatever you want to call it, non-regulated mining, with the tailings and that kind of situation, eating up spaces, and just agricultural expansion to feed people, the vegetable variety, and just the population is still increasing in China too, so they've got those kinds of pressures, and then the quality control issues that have literally blown up in our faces and really brought a lot of attention to Chinese herbs lately. I'm sure all of you have known about, and if you haven't, please investigate into some of these reports. I keep pointing to a piece of paper that's the resources, and that's the one that if you put your name on there, you can check out the media reports for yourselves. One of them, of course, is Greenpeace, the Greenpeace study that we did in, September or so, that was released on the front page of the New York Times. So it came from, I used to just say negative media reports to a really unfortunate situation. And, knowledge is power. It was an expose talking about pesticide contamination. And it really didn't bode well for Chinese herbs, but knowledge is power. Now we need to drive it back. And now China's, the people that are stakeholders are now like sitting up and saying, okay, now we need to do something about this. So that's a good thing. And then the NIH study talking about the heavy metals. That's also quite damning, unfortunately, but it also draws attention to, okay, so how do we start cleaning up the environment to start to make things a little bit better so we're not poisoning people. We don't want to be doing that. So I'm going to leave that one alone. That one's a vast subject in and of itself. And there is somebody right now, and the results aren't in yet, but I'm quite excited. Somebody is doing a repeat of the Greenpeace study, because that's good sound science. Is it repeatable, that kind of thing. So that's pretty interesting, and I look forward to seeing what they come up with. So dyes, fertilizer, over-fertilization is a huge problem in China. It's a social thing, but at any rate, plant growth regulator issues, dyes, adulterants, as some herbs become more scarce, people are using either local variants or other plants that are similar. In some cases, that's probably just fine. In other cases, that's not just fine. But we need to know, and with the GMPs again, which are going to be ruling us whether we like it or not, it's just get on board because it's happening. There's no way to not to try and leave it behind. You know, good manufacturing practices are here to stay. And I am not an industry speak person, really am not. But adulterants, there's a lot of issues with adulterants. Talk to anybody that does a manufacturing operation, and like Gaia herbs, they're pretty funny. It's like what they find in their containers. Yow, pretty fun. This is less fun. This is, okay, it's a little hard to see with the lights up, but this is a ginseng operation in China. And in the back, can you see the white? The white layer, and underneath the trees, there's the sky, the mountains, the trees, and then there's a white. That's actually shade, because ginseng likes to have some shade. You can't just grow it out in the open like that. And so they're growing it under shade. And you can't grow ginseng in a location more than once. There's huge fungal issues with ginseng. So even with commercial operations, they abandon land and they move on. This is in the middle of. They will abandon that land when they harvest that out, and this was a conversion, a land conversion operation, and basically what that means is this was forest. And they just hugged up the trees, and they're burning the stumps, and they'll sterilize the soil, and then they'll grow ginseng there. So it's not very nice, but we can do it like this, and people do it like this here as well, in Wisconsin, or we can do it forest grown. You know, there's different ways to do it. I'm not. It's just good to know what's going on, as you will. Cultivate to conserve. That's kind of my thing. I have a lot of endangered species on our farm, and I tend to try and grow the plants that are having a hard time in China. So we're basically an exit to conservation situation by default, and I'm interested in that. How I originally got much of our material was Robert Newman, and he's now down at Peppers College, and he started the herb garden at the ACTCM in San Francisco. And when he left there to be an herb curator at Jane Botanical Gardens, he disseminated his collection. And so there were a number of people, there's 6 of us or something like that, who he dispersed his collection to. So that's how I ended up with some of the odd critters, because way back when he did that, you could just mail order or talk to somebody and they could just ship you a plant in the mail, and you can't do that anymore. They really frown very heavily on it, and most of the time if you try to do that, or sometimes anyway, unless it's got a phytosanitary degree, but a lot of times if you just try and send a plant or whatever, you know, they have sniffer dogs and situations like that, and they'll just take it out and they'll just never see it. And they're just trying to protect the agricultural trade. I understand why they're doing it, but back when it wasn't like that, and so you could just ship things around. So he had a very unusual collection from different botanical gardens all around the world. So we're trying to grow some of those things that are the more unusual. I guess perhaps I just am a plant nerd and find it interesting, but so we do grow a number of the odd ones. Anything that's like bark. Like, you know, Euphomia omoides, the dujong, oftentimes those are endangered in the wild, or they are endangered in the wild in China right now, because you take the bark, and if you don't take the bark carefully enough, you girdle the tree and kill it. So that's one thing. And then also some like Xinyua, the Magnolia denudata tree. It's a flower bud that's used, right? And that would be the, you know, you take the flower bud, there's no seed, you know, so there's no progeny. So there's no new ones. So that one's also going to be endangered in China. There are starting to be some orchards That's not quite the word. The arboretums, that's not the right word either. Anyway, so tree farms, that works. Okay, tree farms in China for some of the herbs that are getting to be scarce in the wild, so that we can have the medicine. So to grow them here, we have to grow them in enough quantity. I mean, and any one farm is not going to be able to do that here. As you saw from a previous slide, the industry is huge. So I go around and I try and get different groups of people to grow. In fact, I think this is the first student group I've talked to this year. I've talked to a number of farmer groups, agricultural situations, and trying to get them to grow in cooperative situation with each other, and then hopefully also with acupuncture groups that are interested in utilizing domestically grown medicinal herbs as well. And it makes a nice situation because the practitioners can get good quality herbs, and the growers can have contracts that they otherwise wouldn't know how to find. So it's hard enough. It's a steep learning curve to try and figure out how to grow these herbs. That it's nice to be able to have them already pre-sold or have interest in them. And people have been pretty happy, I think, with what's been coming out. Some of the examples are actually over here, and you're welcome to check those out. Those are just 50 or 60 or so that we did on our farm. Any one year, I'm row cropping only about 30 or 40 herbs, but we've got a medicinal orchard too. So some of those herbs are over there too, and yeah, it's nice. So there's groups now up in Washington. There's a group down in New Mexico. There's a group in North Carolina. There's a group in Chicago. So we are starting to get some groups around the country. And I'm also looking to try and persuade anybody in South Texas or Southern Florida. So if anybody wants to turn me on anybody in those places, I'd be interested, because we don't have very many people growing subtropicals. We got a lot of people in the Northeast. It's cold up there. It's limited of what they can grow. But again, like in Florida, it would be limited what they can grow too. So if each one can be growing what grows best where they are, we can have a whole pharmacy with what we have between all these groups. So that's kind of my game, because I realized early on that there was no way. I was trying to make formula for herb off our farm. It's like, yeah, okay, I've got 5 of 7, cool, or I've got 3 of 9, whatever it is. It seems like most farms can't produce enough in variety to make formula. And I like to make formula, or I like to use formula, that kind of thing. Before I forget, the group up in Washington, which is called the Northwest Asian Medicinal Herb no, they're not the consortium, that's the other one. The Northwest Asian Medicinal Herb Network. They're having a very interesting workshop coming up. It's a weekend, a 2-day weekend workshop on April 28th and 9th, right, somewhere around in there. It's on the front page of my website. And what it is Andy Ellis is talking about herb quality. And then the other day, our 2 gentlemen from Northwestern University, I think it's Northwestern University, and they developed, under a nice big fat juicy grant, a organoleptic analysis lexicon and pie chart. I forgot to bring the flyer for it. Pie chart arrangement. That's not all the proper words, but it's a way of analyzing Chinese herbs. It's strictly organized to Chinese herbs. So it's pretty fascinating. It's a way of, organoleptics, you guys. It's sensory analysis. So how we can basically understand the quality of Chinese herbs, and we can talk about it at the same time, where everybody understands what we're talking about. It's kind of similar to, wine speak. When people say, "Oh, it's oaky," it's got blackberries and cassis. The people that know that understand what cassis is. Me, I don't know what cassis is, but whatever. So it's a pretty interesting arrangement, I think. And if anybody wants to check it out, it's on the front page of my website. And then also in growing the different areas, we can find out which herbs grow the best and maybe match the analog situation in China, so that for the herbs that do have a dowdy principle attached to them, that we can try and match that and see if it actually indeed does. It's a long process. It's much longer than I thought it was. I thought, when I first started, I thought I had 5 years, and I get it down, and then I go to acupuncture school. It's, you know, it's like, it's just not going to happen. So I'm going to sit where I am and try and educate people and get somebody to get a leg up so that they can go on further than what I've been able to do. This is just a quick little, you know, similarity landmass situation. And basically, you know, we're right here, and that covers 9 provinces of China. So there's a lot of similarities that we share with China. And I just did a workshop for, believe it or not, Nevada. The state of Nevada hired me. It's like, really? You guys have water here? Enough water? They're trying to develop a different industry other than alfalfa. Because alfalfa totally chews up the water, which they don't really have. And medicinal herbs don't. They don't use much water, which is one reason why I want to grow Chinese herbs where I am at my location, because we have a pond. And that's it. That's all the water we have, is what's in the pond. And I almost didn't farm this year, because we almost didn't get any water. Yeah, it was scary. But it did rain, so I started madly sowing seeds a few weeks back. But anyway, in Nevada, they have a situation where they've got high altitude and not much water. And it's very similar to the area that's in, you know, Tibet, and, you know, basically the roof of the world, the Tarim Basin, you know, all that area over there has some nice analogous situations, soils, the water situation, the nice pressures, those pressures that would be bringing out those active constituents that our bodies interpret as medicine. So I'm trying to get them to grow the ephedra. So this is just a chart out of the book. I imagine some of you guys know, you probably saw some of the little flyer thingies I threw out on the table. That's the book. If anybody ever wants to grow Chinese herbs, this is one of the books that's on the market. The other one is Stephen Foster's. And the other gentleman that he wrote it with, I cannot pronounce his name to save my life, so I'll just say Stephen Foster and co-author. And I should really figure out how to say his name. But at any rate, Stephen Foster's book is called Herbal Emissaries, and it's a nice book, and it has information in there for you all as well, because it also deals with the use of Chinese herbs. My book is strictly about growing. There is a paragraph or so on usage, but you guys, anybody's probably gone past herbs, go to beginning herb classes, probably past that. But this is for not just for farmers, but also backyard gardeners, so if you want, that could be helpful. And this is just a chart out of it, so giving regional examples of herbs, so you don't have to like try and wade through the whole book to try and figure out what might work for you. This is Dowdy principle. I've been talking about it as we've been moving through. I think it's important. I have talked to a number of practitioners, very lauded practitioners that don't even believe in it. I don't know. I generally don't hang out in many camps, but I do recognize that it is a historical tenet. And there certainly are some situations where herbs like to grow in certain locations. And if an herb is basically happy growing in a certain situation, then maybe that's where it should be grown. I can grow all kinds of things. I can grow ephedra where I am, on the coast of California, you know. But does it make good medicine? Maybe, maybe not. I don't have any heat, you know. I've got a lot of water. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I should focus on things that are more similar. Okay, so maybe at this point it'd be a good time to ask if anybody has any questions so that you guys can get to your class or classes on time. Yes, sir.
Have you experimented with using local stuff that grows here that's a Chinese herb, for example, Mormon tea?
From what I've heard from other people, practitioners mostly, they don't believe that Mormon tea has the active components. But again, I don't ever make assertions of herb quality. It's conflict of interest probably, but also I'm not trained. As practitioners, for people that are practitioners, I could say something like, they'll say, oh, yeah, that's great, that's beautiful. We're walking around the farm, we're looking at it. Oh, it smells wonderful, da da da. But I don't use this, or I don't need to buy this from you because I'm going to the coast and getting Artemisia douglassiana. And since as a practitioner, it's like, fine, end of story, great, lovely. But if I'm giving a tour to a group of growers and they say, I don't want to grow this, I'll just go over to the coast and get the douglassiana. It's like mixed name. We cannot sell them that. We have to sell them something that's the standard species. Well, it's a different route. Also, as growers, we need to be very careful because there's enough problems in the trade. I'm sure if you go into your pharmacy here, we can pick out all kinds of stuff. And you can just go to the back of Bensky. Look at all the herbs that are all adulterated. Go into your pharmacy and probably find a bunch of them. It's just how it works.
And then second question is, has anybody gone into the forest and started to kind of classify the medicines according to Chinese medicine? Because there's like hundreds of medicines like right over there that are just growing. I feel like it's really undertapped resource at this time. Just wondering if you know anybody or.
You're right, and that's a huge mother subject. Huge, yeah. I had the lauded idea of when I first started doing this of a world's medicine chest. You know, I mean, wouldn't that be like so great? We can use Ayurveda, we can use Native American, we can use Chinese, we can use Kampo, you know, on and on. It's like I can just barely dent the subject that I've got my hand in, and there's huge amounts written on it. So, try Michael Tierra. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
Peggy?
Is it possible to grow Chinese herbs organically? And have you had experience?
Is it possible to grow them organically? You bet. You bet. And that's why I'm so surprised that so many herbs are coming up, as Andy Ellis would say, dirty. You know, they're coming in contaminated. I don't know if it's because I don't have the bugs, you know, because I'm growing Chinese material in the United States, or what. But no, this is all grown organically. We're no longer certified organic, and I'm not going to hang on that one, but mainly because our farm isn't very big anymore, and I'm not a production farm anymore. But if anybody is going to go into production, you need to be certified organic for the marketing reasons, and that's probably a more different subject than we want to talk about today. But yes, super easy. The only one that is not super easy to grow that way is ginseng. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we buy Senqi seeds from you?
Can you buy what's that?
Senqi, the seed of Senqi.
Oh, Sanchi.
Yes.
No, there is no Sanchi in this country.
Okay.
So, I mean, it'd be great, and I would if I could, but we don't, so I can't. There is a Sanchi semi-analog running around that somebody gifted, a professor gifted me from the ACTCM, and it was so sad, because it's not Sanchi. It's an Enredria cordifolia. It's a common adulterant. And it may have, I mean, and I don't doubt that it has a lot of the same qualities, but it is not Sanchi. Did you actually have a question, Mark?
I wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about the farm that you're helping start around Santa Cruz and like when that might.
Which farm are you talking about?
You mentioned it to me in a conversation that somebody's going to start growing in the Santa Cruz area soon, right?
There's actually a number of folks in the Santa Cruz area that have contacted me about growing and have been doing consultations.
Okay.
And everybody's sort of at the same
Place.
Same place, yeah. There is somebody that was in Santa Cruz and graduated from 5 branches. Ashi Barros. I don't know if anybody knows him or not, but he started his farm, Sourcefield Farms, up in Oregon, and so he's growing up there. But for actually growing in Santa Cruz, there's a number of people that are just getting going that don't really have product yet. But I'm encouraging people in Santa Cruz to do it because there's such a hotbed of people that want to buy it that it would be a really sweet community alliance kind of thing. It's like,
I know. It'd be great to have like a little internship program or something going with them too.
Yeah, I've got one of this year. I think I only have one intern from the Santa Cruz area, but oftentimes people come. We have an internship program, and people come up to the farm once a month for 9 months to learn about growing Chinese herbs, and it's just basically a very simple arrangement of following the seasons. So in the spring we work on seeds, and then we move into transplanting, we move into putting herbs and cultivating in the field, and we move into harvesting and processing of Chinese herbs. So that's what we do for people that want to do it. And we have people coming from all over the place. We have one international student this year. Yes? No. Any other questions, or should I get back to it?
Can we ask you questions at the end?
Of course. Of course. Yes. Okay. Okay, Bill Schoenbart. Yes. Some of us know him. Nice guy. So for his thesis, and I'm glad he didn't tell me that he was buying my material and testing it. I mean, it's good. It's good. Yeah. He goes. He calls up and he goes, oh, I want some danshin. Please send it to me, And I said, oh, I only have a little bit of this year's left. And he goes, oh, I want more. And I said, I don't have any more. He goes, I want more. So I said, well, what are you going to use it for? And he goes, I'm not going to use it for medicine. I just want to check it out. So it's like, well, okay. And I didn't know what he was going to do. So I sold him the sample of the previous year, and that had gone all over the country. So, I mean, I shipped this thing all over the place. And somebody had kept it in their car instead of shipping it back to me. So it was in their car for a whole month in the summer. And then he tested it, and it was actually not too bad. I think it's number 10. I think it's the 10 column. But the 9th column, it's hard actually for me to read. Yeah, Petaluma, California. These two. So lane 9 is the one that's the darkest, and 10 is so this is the non-organoleptic way of analysis. This is the chemical way, what people seem to like these days for GMP. And so it's a chemical analysis, HPTLC. So as I said, I don't hang out in camps. There are people that say, oh yes, that's the only way to go. And people say, don't ever go there, just do organoleptics. Do whatever you want. But what it is, this test does show, what it does show is that it has the constituents that are being called out as being the effective ones in the materia medicus. So that's that. The reason why I don't necessarily love these kind of things is you only get the answers for the things that you ask for. If you don't know what to ask for, you'll never know. And that seems like a lot of hubris to me. But that's not my end of things, so I should leave. But Bill did this one, that was kind of fun. Okay, so we're going to have to rely on using Chinese herbs from China for a very long time, just to make sure that we have all the herbs that we need. It's such an emerging industry here. It's going to take a long time to get, and maybe we'll never get there. I don't know. There's probably going to be a few herbs that are just going to be too hard to grow here. But we have to rely on sustainable wild collection practices, or people in China aren't going to have Chinese herbs. I mean, how profoundly sad is that? And then worldwide cultivation. And there are people that are working on it all over the place. Even in Finland, people are working on growing Chinese herbs. So, yeah. And I'm sure they have a very interesting sliver of what can be grown, I'm sure. Environmental cleanup and protection, that's going to be essential for China at this point. It's so polluted right now. In fact, I got home last night, and the National Geographic had come, and my husband had tossed it out on the table, the dining table. And he was cooking, so I sat down, my glass of wine, and I'm looking at this new issue, and I open it up. And sure enough, there's a spread on China, and this is a coal plant in the background, and this person is trying to cultivate, is trying to farm, and it's got it. I don't have my glasses on. It has a damming. It says a damming thing, and I can't read it without my glasses on. Basically covering local fields, crops, and people with soot. I'm sure that what's in the soot is not very nice. But anyway, so there's, and I'm sure I don't really have to tell you all how pervasive the health issues are, and the water quality issues right now. And that's where, I mean, the pesticides I was talking about before that are contaminated, that are coming in, contaminating the herbs, on the herbs. Now that is an added kind of thing, or it's a drift from nearby. But all of the heavy metal situation that's coming in, on the herbs, that is from industrial pollution, and that's just settling around. In the NIH study, I thought it was interesting that the heavy metals, that the herbs coming off farms had less heavy metals than the herbs that were being wild harvested. And best I can figure is because we're bioremediating the land with the Chinese herbs, and they're being bioaccumulated in us. So if we can start to clean up China, it would be not only good for the Chinese and all the creatures there, it would be good for everybody. And you know, it's not just them. I mean, you know, Hungary, Hungary has big issues. A lot of Western herbs are being grown in that region, and so I mean, it's like we need to be careful everywhere for sure. I'm not just hitting on China, but we are talking about Chinese herbs, and most of them do come from China at this point. So that's why I'm pointing that out. And then there's also important plant areas, and that's what they're called in China right now, important plant areas. And there are getting to be whole ecosystem protections. And that's really nice, and that's really important. And they are setting aside, mostly in name only at this point, but they are setting aside areas so that they can be intact ecosystems. And that's really, really important. Most people don't know, but for even the foods, the domesticated foods that we have, every few years, the scientists and or the breeders, depending on what's going on and who's doing it, of course, will go to a wild source of the origin of whatever it is that they're working with and imbue that back into the domesticated crops. It increases vigor and genetic background and it makes the plant stronger. And we also need that for our medicine. And so it's also important for that, just from an agronomy point of view, that a lot of people don't know about. So we need to really protect certain locations and keep those off limits from people that are going into to change those situations. We need wild space. And before it wasn't such an issue because we didn't, we haven't peopled the planet so much, but now we've peopled the planet so much that we have to like set aside little areas that are kind of like, please let be, that kind of thing. Okay, and then I always add this kind of slide in when I'm talking to students because students are going to say, well, what can I do? What can I do? So avoid endangered or threatened species. Oh, if you guys know Mending the Web, it's a book by, I can't remember her name right now. It's a woman practitioner in the Northeast. Anyway, it's called Mending the Web. And she talks about, from a practitioner point of view, what you can grow, what you can use instead of some of the endangered species to still get the clinical effect. So that's kind of nice. So just try to avoid using the endangered species. And I'm sure that in some of the literature and the things that you guys read, you do find out about the endangered species situations. GAP and GMP compliant. When you guys go into a pharmacy or you're looking at things, make sure that these things are here or are on the label. A lot of times if they're not, what's happening is that they're just pushing things through without the what's the word I was just looking for? With the needed traceability aspects. And if we start asking and telling people that we want this and that we need it for transparency, then they'll start understanding that we care and that we want to know. I think in the past most people have said they don't really want to know, but now that they are starting to hear from us that we do want to know, then I think that they'll start to come up to speed. A lot of the distributors are probably not going to want to hear that, but by law that should be there. It means a little extra work for them, which is why they don't want to hear it. But I mean, I really would like to have some harvest dates. I mean, like our harvest dates, our lot number, everything should have a lot number on it. Our lot number, I specifically made the date so people know how old it is. It's, somebody puts it on their shelf. How long does stuff sit there? You go into your spice cabinet, it's like, oh my God, it says 1998 on the bottom of the bottle. I think I'll get a new one. But if this is your food, I mean, this Shenyang. How old is that? And when it comes in from China, how old is that? always want to know, and you don't know. And I've not been able to ascertain how old anybody's herbs are in anybody's pharmacy. When oftentimes I didn't ask you to do it today, but oftentimes what I'll do is I'll bring like 2 or 3 herbs, and I'll ask somebody to go to the pharmacy and pick out the same herbs, and we'll pass it around, and they'll be going, oh. You know, because something like boha, it's an aromatic herb. It should have those volatile oil components. And a lot of pharmacies, it's like, it's sort of green, and it's a leafy material, but it doesn't have any fragrance. So does it have the function that it's supposed to have? I don't know.
Yeah, we've had some that have absolutely zero smell,
Wow.
zero fragrance before.
Yeah, and I think that we should be asking about that. It's like, what went on with those herbs? Were they just warehoused so long that they don't have any chi left? Or were they previously used and maybe extracted and then re-dried? I mean, they would still probably have some components, you know, some workable components in it. And obviously they work. I mean, we know that they work, otherwise we probably all wouldn't be here. But it is curious. It's like, what does it take? Even 10-year-old samples. We have to keep, as growers, we have to keep retention samples. And it's to protect ourselves mainly. So it's like in 5 years or something like that, somebody comes back and it's like, you know, somebody died from my product. And this was the product, and I got one of the components from you. And I'm like, oh, tell me about that. And then so what happens is that the court takes my sample, which has the same lot number, of course, and sends it to a lab, and they test it, and they say, oh, no, hers is what it's supposed to be. It's not that herb, and they go to some other component. So that just freed me. So I have all these retention samples. But even at 10 years, it's never happened. And 10 years, I can smell the boha that we have, and it's still, I mean, yeah, it doesn't look great like the freshest stuff, but it still smells just like mint, you know, the boha mint.
Could it depend on how it's stored?
Sure, for sure, yeah, you can take a pretty good herb and totally kill it. You know, all you have to do is put anything like that on your windowsill. You know, the whole summer it's like, ooh. For sure, but anything that's being sold in the trade and being sold to a pharmacy should be kept better than that. Mine is only a semi-controlled dry room. Mine is not any great shakes. Yeah. And then support domestic growers where you can, just to try and create an industry. I mean, even if it's only counting food miles, you know, how far something has to travel, you know, and the footprint that we're all responsible for. You know, that would help on that one. So this is the ending slide, and that's just one of our Gentiana scabras, and it is one of the most beautiful herbs, and it's totally untouched because I don't know how to touch things up, but it's a really incredible plant. And anyway, so thanks for listening, and I wanted to see if there were any other questions, and then you're welcome to check out the herbs. And you're welcome to smell them and taste them. They are unsulfured. There is an interesting thing coming down the pike. I don't know if anybody knows about the Food Modernization Act. Our government has instigated it, and it's being implemented at this point. And what it is basically is a number of points that we're supposed to adhere to as producers. And for example, we're not allowed to add sulfur. Well, we can add sulfur, but you can't add so much sulfur that it becomes, I don't know what the threshold is. There's some threshold at this point. And Chinese herbs now are a little bit targeted because a lot of them have sulfur on them. And our herbs were used as the control study for the people that developed the test for added sulfur. So it'll be interesting when that comes online to see what happens with the Chinese herbs. Whether they actually even notice, whether they get stopped at port, whether just certain ones are changed, whether China is proactive and does something else besides, you know, sulfiting the BIHA or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it hasn't happened yet. But keep your eye, you know, trained for something like that might be coming through soon. I don't know when. I should find out when that is. Yes. Yes, we do a lot of race cropping, a lot of intercropping, integrated farming systems, permaculture if you want to go that way. I have a lot of permaculture students. I do not call myself a permaculturist, but I call myself a polyculturist. I am not biodynamically certified. It's very expensive. I do follow some of the protocols.
It's also really hard to get a lot of the materials for the preparation,
The cow harness.
deer bladders and stuff.
You know,
Bladders.
yeah, you know what? You can actually buy those now.
Really?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, from the Josephine Porter Institute. So that's not so hard. And I oftentimes will work with a gal named Jean Cablette. She's from High Falls Gardens up in New York, and she's biodynamically certified. And you know what? Technically, I think she's not biodynamically certified. She follows it much more closely than I do. It's hard to be a production farm and do biodynamics because they have a very specific arrangements. Like any particular day could be work with a flower day or work with a root day, and it's all astrologically organized, and it's fairly Western. But you can have like 2 weeks or something like that when you're not supposed to work with flowers, and on a production schedule, that's really wicked hard to manage, very hard to manage. But I think it's a good thing to adhere to. You know, if one can manage it, it's not easy. You're welcome.
I was wondering, first if you kind of tell us, I know Spring Wind is a good supplier, like good ethical practices of like sourcing their herbs and making sure they're the right quality species.
But they're all obligated by law to be doing the same testing.
So
Yeah.
besides Spring Wind, are there any other ones that you think are?
You know, you should ask your herbs teacher. I really don't know. I find them all.
Con Herbs is very clean, if that's what you're looking for. They have really, really strict testing.
It's all supposed to be the same. I mean, there's all.
I think Con's is a little more stringent for some reason.
Okay, yeah, they all have a basis, but there's a lot of companies out there that don't do any, and that's totally against the law. But the oversight regulation is so lax right now. But I'm not the right person to ask that one.
Do you know where we can access seeds? Like I know that you said you were growing endangered species, and are you growing first to sell seed?
I do have a lot of seed here, or some seed here anyway. There's on our website. There's probably even a couple more varieties. I have. Looks like they're all gone already. Okay. There's 2 other seed purveyors that I would recommend. Yeah, Horizon, exactly, Horizon Herbs, and it's probably horizonherbs.com. And then Richter's Herbs, and I sell to both of them. So you might just, if you buy from them, you might get my seed anyway. And then. Oh, Richter's, RICHTERS, richtersherbs.com. And they're up in Canada on the eastern seaboard, or close that way. Anyway, but they can ship to the United States without, troubles. But if you want to get just a couple of plants, you can get herb plants from Crimson Sage. That's what her name is. And she does Crimson Sage, yeah. And she's out of Wairika, and she does mail order. And actually at the farmers market, I think at the what's it called? Merritt Lake. At Merritt Lake farmers market, I think Richard Koenig is there with spirit healing plants, maybe. And he has a number of Chinese herbs, and he has herbs from other areas of the world as well, all healing herbs. And so those are. But I don't think there's anybody else locally.
And then I saw, sorry,
Questions are good.
in your book, I think it's like on page 18 and 19, you're talking about growing regions. I'm curious about growing in the Southwest, like high elevation. I was wondering if I could possibly email you and get more information on what species you think would grow pretty well there.
Yes, and you can. There was the slide up there, but on page 18 or 19, I think it's the same one. You'll see the column for the Southwest. And those are the picks, generally speaking, for high elevation.
Is that all zone like 4 or
That's pretty high elevation.
yeah.
That's really high elevation. Is it like at 8,000 feet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's cordyceps.
Yeah.
You know, it's another. You can't email me. If it goes on too much, though, I'll usually ask for a consultation fee because I do this a lot for a lot of people. But you're welcome to say, just a couple questions here. But also on the front page, or home page, I guess I'm supposed to say, of the website, on the left-hand side it says domestic herb production. And I'm sorry about this, but it's 10 or 12 hours of free lecture time from moi. And it was a grant to New Mexico State.
Okay. Yeah. That's newer.
Yeah, and it was done up near Alcalde, so it was up in the mountains there, so it's pretty ideally suited to what you're talking about. And there's a couple other people that are growing, so if you do end up there, definitely email me and I can put you in contact with some of the growers there.
Okay.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So the growers that you know, like the ones in Colorado, and then you mentioned like ecological growers, like growers that are committed to these practices. Is there a network that there's a compiled list of them on your website? Do you know what I mean? I mean, you probably certainly know them because they
Yeah, I
are colleagues of yours for sure, and you guys communicate. But you were talking about the movement to have more of these herbs grown in different regions in the United States, and is there a way you guys are at least linked together? Like, do you have a list on your website of other people around the United States? Yeah.
No, we don't, and we don't on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to do a development of a responsible situation, and so Jean Goublette and I have something called localherbs.org, and it's not super fully up and running. There is information on there, but we're not linking people fully. We were, and then what happened is that all the growers got completely inundated, where they were just hammered. So
By interest or
Yeah.
by
Interest in that product?
yeah, I could sell everything I grow many times over.
Wow.
There's huge interest, and so they got totally swamped and freaked. Most of them pretty much freaked. So Jean and I are screening.
No, and I can respect that because, like you said, it's not quite at the point where it can handle that.
Right, and that's why I'm speaking more to growers than I am to practitioners or students these days, because we're trying to create.
Organize.
Yeah, we're trying to create, like, you guys, I think of you guys as like the future buyers for the people that I'm trying to get as future growers, but it's like we got the cart before the horse right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but in Megan's case, I mean, she's somebody who I knew would be here today because she has been from day one interested in growing. So you're talking to a grower
Mhm.
and a user.
Yeah, perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, but you're welcome to keep in contact with me, and you can even say I was at this school and heard this lecture. Do you have anything going right now? Or we're trying to also find funding. Jean wrote us a grant in 2004. It was a USDA value-added grant that was $350,000. Yeah, and that really chugged a lot of things along, which was really interesting. And then there was, a few years later, we got a number of different grants, World Wildlife Fund, the Kellogg Foundation, different things. But right now there aren't any grants, so we don't have any way of doing anything other than just volunteer. And to be frank, both of us work a heck of a lot of hours, and we're a little bit tired. We both have farms, and that's a 70-hour job itself. And then I come out and do the speaking thing. So there's a lot of work going on, but I think keeping in contact is a really important thing, because at some point it will all work and it'll flow. And if we can all have the tools at our fingertips when it blossoms, everybody can either join or not join. But we're working up to it. It's been harder than I thought to try and come up to speed, because there hasn't been. There's no other industry. I was hoping that I could just backpack or piggyback, or whatever we'll call it, onto the Western trade, medicinal herb trade, and they're like this. It just doesn't work. Western folks they're not licensed like y'all. It's just a whole different mindset.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, they want to use Chinese herbs, but God, what do they want to do with it? Whoa, 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 whoa.
There's structure in place.
Yeah, and it's like maybe that works, maybe that's fine, but it's like that's like let's not. I'm not really into doing heavy duty experiment on Bon Shah or something. And it's like so I backed off, and I'm just selling to practitioners that would use it in a historically tested or more traditional kind of situation. Besides, I mean, there's just not enough product to go around, and I want it to find what I would consider an appropriate venue.
Yeah.
Yes.
How realistic would it be to grow Mawfong here? I ask because I'm from Reno originally, and Mormon tea is a weed. It grows everywhere there.
It's true.
And I had thought about trying to cultivate Mawfong, and I'm just wondering what would be the issues.
Well, the first issue is that you only can sell to licensed practitioners by law. And I always say that right off the bat, but you know, here I am in the choir. But yeah, it's pretty easy to grow. I mean, in Reno, it would be super ideal to grow it. Here, it would depend on where you are. If you were just a hill to the east, maybe.
But I mean, well, because I'm partially planning on doing my practice in Reno and then possibly also cultivating it there. Are there any legal issues about that as long as I'm just selling to licensed practitioners?
That's the only one.
Okay.
That's the only one.
But the DEA isn't going to raid me and demand that I prove I'm not selling meth.
People who want your herbs might raid you. Yeah.
And that's a possibility.
You want to keep it probably pretty quiet, yeah.
Yeah. If anybody sees them growing in botanical gardens, please don't take it. You know, sometimes they'll be in botanical gardens, but the name is no longer there. Yeah, because people go, yeah, Reno's ideal. Santa Cruz proper, nix nay. Not so probably a great. There's a lot of other great herbs to grow. Path of least resistance. What grows well besides the pests are a good idea.
So Peggy, in terms of coming up to your farm, what should we hold as our intention? And what should we maybe do or learn or think about before we come so we can make the most of our time there? And then what season is the best time to come?
I'll start with the last question first. The growing season.
Yeah.
When things are actually green. When things are up are pretty much when right about now in through October into November, depending on when frost hits, and that's a great time to come visit the farm. And it seems like the people that come to visit the farm get the most out of it after they've had their herbs classes. Yeah, I mean, it's like I love that little thing when we're walking past the Zishier, and somebody will go, "Oh my God, it grows in water." That is so cool.
Especially considering it's medicinal property. Talk about doctrine of signatures right there.
Yeah, right. And if you don't know anything, it's like, oh, so says Zishier. But I love that. Oh my God, how cool. You know? So yeah, we've got probably on site, I don't know, at least 200 herbs at any one time doing something or another.
Can we purchase herbs from you? Are you, as students, or are you still trying to keep it a narrower funnel than that?
If I have a bunch of it, sure, that's fine. And because of the labeling law, if you guys are coming up and you know you want something, you know, like a Dubois or something like that, email ahead and it's like, if you and for people that are coming up, I'll sell a quarter pound or something like that. But if you email me from afar and say, "Well, you only send me a quarter pound of Dubois," it's like,
not worth your time.
Yeah.
Bigger things to do.
Yeah, most of the herbs, I didn't bring a list, but I could send it to anybody if they ask for it. We have at any one time, or I don't know, we can probably harvest, say, 75 different herbs, and most of them are in the fall. That's just kind of how it works out. We adhere to all traditional harvest times, but at this point, I think I probably only have about 5 herbs in stock. it's all sold out. So, except for I have a lot of I should have brought some to just give away.
Are you talking about just the leaf that has been dried versus how it's usually processed to be burned as moxa?
Yeah.
What state is it's just the dried leaf.
It's
right?
dried leaf. Yeah. In the internship, that's actually one of our activities is we make our own moxa. Yeah, we totally destroy my office.
But considering, I mean, since it's not one that is taken in, so you don't have to, for selecting it for clients, it can be used for so many clients. You don't use, it can be used singly, it's, as moxa. That would actually be kind of fun, is to come up and see you guys go from dry leaf to prepared moxa.
It's not that hard. You can do this at home. It's a DUI herb.
DIY preparation.
DIY.
Oh, DIY? Did I get that one? What was
DIY.
Oh,
Under the influence
yeah. Oh, that's funny.
It's DIY.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't have issues there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I think there isn't necessarily intentional that you have to do, but it does help if you have some herbs class on board, just because it becomes much more interesting. So.
Well, and I know there's a really good book. It has the entire library of Materia Medica in picture form, specifically so that you could appreciate the doctrine of signatures. So if that's a way you learn well, I know that's one of the recommended textbooks.
I'd love to know what that book that is, Andrea.
Yeah.
There's actually a bunch of
Go to Sacred Lotus. He's always got it like listed somewhere on his page for sale, and it's like called the Visual Materia Medica. And that would be, that certainly is one of the books I thought about getting before I would go out.
Yeah.
So that, like you were saying, you walk by the water and go, oh, I know what that is. Yeah. And it adds, at least for us, from a learning perspective, it adds that additional layer of understanding and remembrance about what it does. And I actually am in contact with a lot of the interns I've had over the years. I've forgotten we've been doing this for so many years. I have no idea what year anybody was from anymore, but it's like I always recognize people. And it's really interesting. I hear years later about people saying that it really did reinforce their education and made them a better practitioner because they were able to have a deeper understanding of the herb. And sometimes at lunchtime you'll just find people just visiting with a particular plant. They'll keep going back to month after month. They'll keep going back and working with a particular plant. Well, I don't know if it's a totem plant or whatever, but I do notice certain students doing that. Or Qigong, they've moved over and they're doing Qigong, in a certain place in the field that's a little bit different than the rest of it. So we do Qigong with them up in the fields. Anyway, yes, Laura.
I was just going to say, I think we have to give the room back at 1:30, but maybe if we could just have a couple of minutes where people take any last quick looks if you guys want to, before we have to give the room back.
Sounds good. And if anybody wants any seed or anything like that, it's all on the website. And you're welcome to email me if you have any further questions after I disappear today.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you.